So Poor Things was one of my 3 favorite films of 2023. Emma Stone's Oscar win for Best Actress is an instant all-timer. And now Stone and Yorgos Lanthimos are back with a new film, Kinds of Kindness. My name is Brian Rowe, this is the awards contender, and here is my no-spoiler review. I have been so impressed with the work of Yorgos Lanthimos throughout the years, and after that 1-2 punch of The Favorite in 2018 and Poor Things in 2023, I'm like, I will follow this guy anywhere. Whatever kind of movie he wants to make, I will be there opening weekend. And now he has a muse in Emma Stone, who's one of my favorite actresses, and them teaming up so soon after Poor Things to make another movie, a very different movie. Like extremely weird and different from Poor Things in pretty much every way. I went into Kinds of Kindness very cold. I knew almost nothing. I'd seen one trailer. I had heard it's an anthology film with 3 separate stories where the same actors play different characters in those stories, but I didn't know what the stories were about, and I was like, is this going to be science fiction? Is this contemporary realism? I had no idea, honestly, what I was signing up for. Like, when the movie started, I just settled in, ready for a nearly 3-hour Yorgos Lanthimos movie with Emma Stone and Jesse Plemons and Hong Chow and Willem Dafoe and all of these amazing actors. Having the opportunity to see these actors play multiple characters, like, I was very intrigued by Kinds of Kindness. I was like, what is this movie going to be? And now that I have finally watched it, I have kind of a mixed review for you. And I would say, I know we're only halfway through the year, but I do think Kinds of Kindness is going to go down, for me, as the most frustrating film of 2024. Because there's so much to like in this movie, and because of the order of the stories, I just got more and more disappointed by the end. Because the first story, where Jesse Plemons is kind of the lead character, is fantastic. The opening 45-ish minutes to Kinds of Kindness, I was all in. The story is creative and weird and offbeat, kind of David Lynchian in the way it plays out. It's definitely out there. You have to go with it. But I found there to be emotional stakes in the first story I didn't find as much of in stories 2 and 3. So again, no spoilers. I'm not going to tell you what happens in these 3 stories, but let me just give you a brief logline of the 3 pieces of this narrative. The first story, called The Death of RMF, stars Jesse Plemons as a man who works for Willem Dafoe and basically will do anything his boss wants him to do, including potentially killing somebody else. And when he hesitates in committing to a job, all things kind of crumble for this guy, and some havoc ensues. The second story is called RMF is Flying, and in this story, Jesse Plemons welcomes back his wife, played by Emma Stone, who's been away as a marine biologist, but when she comes back, she starts to act really different, and Plemons begins to wonder, is this really my wife? And then in the third story, called RMF Eats a Sandwich, Stone and Plemons play cult members who are trying to track down a person who has the ability to heal others. The journey in finding her comes with a lot of complications. And that's all I'm gonna say about the plots. Like, those are the basic ideas of the 3 stories. All 3 narratives are strange. They all kind of teeter on the edge of science fiction, horror a little bit, and there's not a lack of imagination here. All 3 stories are brimming with ideas. I mean, I feel like if Yorgos Lanthimos had decided to make 3 more stories, made this movie like 5 hours long, he probably could have come up with some other narratives, other things to have Stone and Plemons and Dafoe and all of these great actors do. This is a very unique and interesting piece of work. Like, how many anthology films are being made these days with big actors, a big director, going to theaters? I was watching Kinds of Kindness last night, and I just kept thinking, what an unusual idea we almost never see anymore. Like, in the 60s and 70s, we were getting horror anthologies all over the place. If you go back to the early 70s, every few weeks it seems like there's a new horror anthology movie with 3 stories or 5 stories or whatever, like Tales from the Crypt and the Vault of Horror, that was giving audiences these little nuggets of terror. But like the last 20 to 30 years, you really don't see this kind of movie very much. I mean, we have large ensemble films where there will be 6, 7, 8 stories and we're bouncing around to a bunch of different characters, but to have a complete story with a first act, a second act, a third act that ends after 45, 50 minutes. We even get the actors' credits at the end of the segment before part 2, before part 3 begins. And so we're not jumping around in this movie. We have a complete story A, and then complete story B, and then complete story C, end of movie. And so here is the honest truth. Kinds of Kindness is already starting at a disadvantage because anthology films are really hard to pull off. Because you're always going to have that one story that's a little better than the others. The audience doesn't get the satisfaction of following one set of characters throughout an entire movie. Basically, you have to stop and start from scratch. Twice in Kinds of Kindness, the audience has to regroup. Like, okay, now we're watching this story and these characters. But especially, I would say, in this movie, having the same cast all the way through, playing different people, it is kind of jarring. Like when we start stories 2 and 3, you really have to take a few minutes to be like, okay, it's the same actors, but now they're playing these kinds of characters. Like it's not immediate. It takes a moment to regroup. And on that level, Kinds of Kindness is going to be a difficult movie for many people to enjoy, I think. But when it comes to my take on this movie, if all 3 stories had been powerful, entertaining, surprising, fantastic. If I had loved all 3 stories, this little observation, I would say more than a criticism of the anthology formats, wouldn't matter. The movie would be an abundance of riches, an appetizer, a main course, and a dessert. 3 great stories with actors I love, with a director I adore, and again, Kinds of Kindness starts off on the right foot. The opening story to this movie I was really into. It's unpredictable, suspenseful, propulsive, it has emotional stakes, it has a very satisfying ending, and that Jesse Plemons performance. Watching the first story, I was like, oh, that's why he won Best Actor at Cannes. Like, he's very good in stories 2 and 3, but it's really story 1 that brings out the best in Plemons. He has this confused, almost desperate quality that's a lot of fun to watch. I would give The Death of RMF a 9 out of 10. I was very satisfied, very excited to see where this movie would go. And then we get to the second story, which is pretty good, I would say. It's good. It wasn't as surprising or as mysterious, I would say, as the first. I kind of knew where things were heading. Like, if you've seen enough episodes of The Twilight Zone, the second story, I'm like, okay, the resolution, like where it goes, made sense. It doesn't have the same excitement, propulsion of the first story, but the actors really bring story 2 to life. I do think Emma Stone's best work in the movie is in the second story called RMF is Flying. There is something very off about her in that middle segment, and it's fun to see her play. It's fun to see her go to some wild extremities in that character. There are 2 jaw-dropping moments in story 2. Like 2 moments where my entire theater was loudly cringing in the most entertaining of ways. Again, the ending of it isn't overly surprising, but it's fun, it's entertaining. A slight step down, I would say, from story 1, but RMF is Flying, I would give it a 7. A 7 out of 10. So why did I find this movie so frustrating? Because I didn't really care for the third story. Like, I was going with it for a while, but boy, did story 3 called RMF Eats a Sandwich go on and on. Like, there are good things in it. I think the most visually exciting of the 3 stories is probably the third one, but I would say the narrative itself is lacking in emotional stakes. I found the characters underdeveloped, especially Jesse Plemons in the third story, gets almost nothing to do. Like, he's kind of a non-character. Emma Stone is all over story 3. Like, she is our focal point. I love her look. She's got some nice moments. But that last story never takes flight. It feels like the longest of the 3 stories by far, and it never forms a satisfying, cohesive whole. It feels like a screenplay that needed a few more passes, and even though Emma Stone is giving it her all, it just, after a while, felt kind of tired. It has a moment of animal cruelty I did not like at all. I understood why it was there. It was necessary for the story, I guess, but it really put me off toward the end. And the very last scene is absurdly funny, I guess, but when Kinds of Kindness cut to the end credits, my hand kind of grasped air. I didn't know what to take away from this movie, other than it being a creative lark for Lanthimos and this cast. They're all clearly having a lot of fun playing these different characters. It's not the world of The Favorite or Poor Things. He's shining a light on the absurdities of modern life in these narratives that all have a surreal quality, and that was cool. I admired what he's doing here. The performances are very good, but ultimately I find this movie very frustrating and kind of a missed opportunity because I do think the quality of the stories drop with each one, leading to the third story, which should be the best one. Like, we should end with the story everybody's talking about, which is the most engaging, the most entertaining, and that's not the case here. Lanthimos starts things off with the best story. By far, I would say, the best story. And then there's a dip in quality all the way to the end over nearly 3 hours. And so, to be honest, I did walk out of Kinds of Kindness a little disappointed, even though I admired a lot of what Lanthimos was trying to do. This is a significant step down, I would say, from The Favorite and Poor Things. Like, those 2 movies rip. Those 2 movies are incredible. Kinds of Kindness is an interesting experiment I don't know if I'll be thinking about a few months from now. I mean, I'll take this movie any day over some crappy summer blockbuster, but I do think Kinds of Kindness does fall a little short. I mean, that last story, RMF Eats a Sandwich, I would probably only give it a 4 out of 10. Like, if the entire movie had been an expansion of that specific story, I wouldn't have liked this at all. I'm happy that wasn't the whole thing. I'm happy I got to spend time with Jesse Plemons in that earlier story, which again, I just found so compelling. And one other thing about this movie that bothered me was that I didn't necessarily see a through line from story 1 to story 2 to story 3. Like, there's a small character we see more than once, who we see at the beginning and at the end, but I was like, is there significance to the order of these stories? If story 3 had been story 1, if story 2 had been 3, I don't think it would have made much of a difference. I almost wish story 1 was at the end, because then maybe I'd like the movie better. I don't know. If you're an adventurous moviegoer, you might like Kinds of Kindness more than I did. I mean, I would still say it's worth seeing. If you're a fan of Lanthimos and Emma Stone and Jesse Plemons, there's a lot of really interesting things in this movie. Even though I definitely had issues with that third story, you might like it, maybe, more than I did. Now, when it comes to the Oscars, to the next award season, back in April, I made a ridiculously early Oscar predictions video, and some of you reached out and said, why was Kinds of Kindness not even mentioned in this video? Because I had heard it's an anthology film and that it was coming out in June. I was like, I don't know if that's going to be a big awards player. Now that I've seen the movie, I can say with full confidence, Kinds of Kindness is not going to be an awards movie. I know Emma Stone just won the Best Actress Oscar for another Yorgos Lanthimos movie. I know Jesse Plemons won Best Actor for Kinds of Kindness at Cannes. It doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, outside of a lone screenplay nomination, maybe, and that's a giant maybe, I think Kinds of Kindness is this year's Asteroid City, a movie with a great cast from a respected director, released in June to mixed and favorable reviews that just doesn't play a role in award season. I do think that's going to be Kinds of Kindness. And you know what? That's okay. Not every interesting, offbeat movie has to be an awards contender. Kinds of Kindness is what it is. You will like it or not like it, or be mixed about the movie like me. At the end of the day, I'm happy it exists. I'm glad I watched it. I can't wait for the next film from Lanthimos starring Emma Stone and Jesse Plemons. But I also have to be honest, as someone who loved, with a capital L, The Favorite and especially Poor Things, I was a little let down by Kinds of Kindness. Anthology movies are very difficult to pull off, and Lanthimos came close, but not quite close enough for me to say I really liked it or loved it. Ultimately, I do think Kinds of Kindness is going to go down as the most frustrating movie of 2024. I give this film a 6 out of 10. Thanks so much for watching and subscribing, and let me know in the comments below what you thought of Kinds of Kindness. Do you agree with my review, or do you think I have it all wrong? We'll see you next time at the Awards Contender.